Okay, so you both can see it, the temple in Myoshinji.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. So I want to take you into the temple, and I first of all have to say, it's really my privilege to be able to share this information about the Kyoto program and about Kyoto in general. It's hard to convey the precise feeling of being in Kyoto in the summer and be able to participate in these really magical spaces. But I hope through seeing a couple of pictures, you can put yourself into the environment. So this is a view of the Daishinin Temple in Myoshinji where you stay. It is a really unique temple. It's about 300 years old, and the garden is also quite old. It's really well known for these unique azaleas. I don't know how old that pine is as well, but beautiful space, very well kept, incredible people, caretakers of the garden. And some of you may know that in Japan in the 20th century, monasteries, Zen monasteries, were shifted to becoming private residences. So there is a temple family, even though historically Zen monks did not uh, have spouses and children. So this is a home, and it is also shared with us as a dormitory. This is a view from the room I stayed in 2016, I believe. It's a beautiful view onto a garden space where we actually do some of the upkeep in the program at least one day. We clip some hedges and we rake some stones, be able to get that experience as well. The temple is extremely peaceful. It's really lovely place to stay. Uh, it has about a 10 p.m. curfew, generally speaking, when you're supposed to be back from going about the city or going about your research in the city and uh, meals or whatever it is, and basically enter in at quiet hours. Sometimes people will do work when we're doing the work studio portion. They'll stay up late. That's quite all right and very understandable. And also, there's a number of festivals that you're going to want to go to that are days when we have a later curfew. This is another view of the temple. It is a well taken care of Japanese garden, Zen garden. It's a beautiful space. It's a space where you can imagine meditating. This view is right from one of the meditation halls of the temple, and to the left of that picture is the dormitory area as well. So Kyoto in the summer is, I mean, first of all, if you're familiar at all with the tea ceremony, there is many seasons in Japan. In tea, every season is based on the poetry of the Tale of Genji, and that is basically a season every single week and or every single tea ceremony in a regular tea meeting. And in each of those seasons, there's particular foods, there's particular sweets, there's particular kind of moments and memories of resonance that people experience. So one of the seasons that are larger categories of seasons is called Tsuyu in June, and it is just a beautiful time when there is a great deal of rain. It's the rainy season, and you'll be very dry under a large roof, and then suddenly um, the sky opens up and rain comes down, and it comes down in a sheet right down on that roof, and you're still dry on the engawa, the porch, but you're able to really experience that rain from a point of dryness and see the wetness there. Then it becomes a little sunnier and a little drier in the middle of the summer in July, and there's a lot of these summer festivals like Gion Matsuri, which I will share. This is a iconic view, perhaps not iconic. This is a kind of evening sense of view. I don't know if any of you have seen any manga or anime from Japan, but there's a lot of scenes in the summer with cicadas, and there's scenes of evening where you have these kind of large clouds and sunsets, and there's a wetness to the air. And this is the kind of scene, the kind of space where I'd like to go walk down to the convenience store and get an ice cream and maybe some frozen grape juice or something like that, and then walk back and relax at the dormitory temple. This is, I believe, taken by a building in Shimabara, which is a location in Kyoto where I used to live for about a year and a half or so. It's an old entertainment area, and this is called Sukiya style, which is associated oftentimes with the development of tea ceremony and Edo period, codification, and the relationship to architecture. The program is open to architects, landscape architects, urban designers, urban studies. Actually, it's open to anyone, although obviously the more interested you are in the topic will come across in your application. And I think this window is just lovely and fantastic. And what I love most is the earthen wall that shows that age over time. This is a pickle store in Nara. I particularly like this image for whatever reason. This is a beautiful store. I think this is on the main street, one of the main shopping streets in Nara, if memory serves correctly. I could be wrong. And pickles are one of my favorite things in Japan. I feel like you go to a Japanese restaurant in the United States, you might have some pickles as a side dish, but it's not something I was super familiar with growing up until I lived in Japan, until I studied abroad there. And I was just immersed in this complete world of pickles. And there's different pickles in every season. There's different pickles in every location, every neighborhood, every city, every town. And oftentimes they're fresh mountain vegetables, things of that nature that are pickled. And it's wonderful. This is a photograph I did not take, but I have some photographs and many experiences of Gion Matsuri. It is a huge festival that it takes place in Kyoto. People often wear yukatas, which is a kind of evening gown. And we will definitely, as a group, I believe, go. And as people, of course, in the program, you have teamwork. So you might go with your team, you might just go with your friends. You might have people visiting, or you might know people already in Kyoto. But this is a festival you don't want to miss. And like I said, we have a little bit later curfew on that night. And there's actually several festival nights. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. The whole street, it's a wide street here, is just filled with people and lots of stands. And actually, many of the streets are filled with people. So the experience in Kyoto, there's a lot of different kinds of neighborhoods. All right, here that's actually public housing in the background, and this is a former children's play area that, as you can see, is not being used super frequently, and it's been turned into a garden. And I think that's really interesting, and it shows something about the demographic shifts, especially on a spatial basis, as certain neighborhoods that have been stigmatized or low income, people will leave and not want to raise children there. And so this one has been turned into a garden. So you get these exclusive temple visits. In fact, I'm not going to show you all the pictures of one of the temples, Tokayon, that I want you to experience for yourself in person, because it's a really magical place, and it's a place that's not open to the public in general. It's actually very close to where we stay. So a wonderful thing about the experience of being in this place is you can see landscape architecture techniques being applied in their most kind of strong sense in a whole different variety of forms. The early Edo period and the Muromachi Momoyama period, these are times when landscape architecture was really being very innovative. Okay, this temple is Jikoin in Nara, and I believe it is a major inspiration for the Donnell Garden in Sonoma. You enter it through this kind of almost chthonic experience where you're immersed among these roots in this sunken walkway, and then you emerge in this patio, and you're able to look out on the plain of Nara beyond. There's a lot of trees now and also buildings, but when you stand there on that porch, you get a similar sense that you get in the Donnell Garden. Here, as you can see, is Professor Daisuke Yoshimura and one of the monks in the temple of Jikoin. And one of the amazing things about this program is that when we go to the temples, we almost always have an opportunity to converse and ask questions with monks about many things about the practice. In this case, this is actually a home of a certain tea school, and tea being, the way of tea, matcha, tea practice. It's a it's a complicated practice to those. Well, some people would say it's simple, it's just tea and water, but there's a kind of very deep theoretical and philosophical tradition and literature that's connected to also this very everyday simple practice. This school in particular is really interesting because they emphasize certain elements of freedom and style, and obviously the garden is actually quite codified. And so we could get into thinking about why are certain elements of freedom in the tea practice and the garden having certain codified elements. What is significance, for example, of seeing this large open scene of ordinary life? How does that connect to the tea practice in this case, when tea is often practiced in a kind of confining hut that wants to shut out these kinds of things? So so this is a conversation that would be really interesting to have. And Yoshimura Sensei is even better than me at translating. I'd say I can handle some translation, but Japanese is not my first language. So communication fine and teaching fine. But we're lucky to also be working with Yoshimura Sensei for translation, and also Moto Uchi Sensei and myself. So it is a really good opportunity for students to come in who don't have any experience in Japanese, be able to have a free conversation with people like monks and people working in museums and people just on the street in the neighborhood. This is in Koyasan, which is a Shingon-shu temple, monastery, I should say, on the top of a mountain that we visit for a couple days. We stay in some inns there in the monasteries. We have access to those temples. We visit the gardens. And I just love this picture, this scene. This is back in actually one of the gardens in Tokayan in Myoshinji, which is the monastery where we're living. And Myoshinji is a lead Rinzai Zen monastery in Japan, in Kyoto. So it's kind of the head of that school. One of our favorite students, Alison Bartlett, is here, and she's actually been very supportive of this program as well. She's teaching now at the AA in London. I think a lot of people who participate in this program go into teaching, or they go into practice, and we're always happy to have people come back and be involved in the program. So this is the temple, the depths is associated with Kobodaishi's mausoleum in Koyasan. It's an incredible place full of these 1,000-year-old cedar trees, cryptomeria trees, and it's just very magical. In Koyasan, there are these gardens inspired by Tang China, and they are really interesting. The watery gardens surrounded by, within a courtyard, surrounded oftentimes by buildings. And we go through Nara. I mentioned the pickle store. Here, that's actually Hallie, one of our students, taking a picture with a deer in Nara. And Nara is the main area of a lot of the temples of Nara. That's Todaiji in the distance. Very large wooden building, large great Buddha inside. The park space around it is used by deer as a playpen, and people feed the deer and come up to the deer, and it's just, and it's an interesting tourist experience in its own right. Here, so we do at all the temples, we do watercolor painting, and that's actually the media course out of the 2 courses that the program involves. And here's Flora Chen sharing her watercolor paintings. I think it was either in the midterm review or approaching the midterm review that year in 2016 when she did the program. And Flora Chen is actually going to come back as the guest instructor. She will be teaching in the 2025 summer. And she's just very passionate about watercolor, and she's actually been a practitioner for a number of years at Hart-Howerton in San Francisco. So she's also a very experienced practitioner. You don't have to be an expert at watercolor to do this program by any means. We teach you how to draw, how to draw perspectives, how to do watercolor, how to use watercolor in different ways. And let's imagine that even after going through that process, exerting all that effort, you're still not confident about it. That is okay, because the drawings we do in the design portion of the class, so there's media and there's design, are team projects. So you'll be able to refine your skills. without a doubt. And you'll be able to deploy those skills because everybody has something to offer. So you'll be able to build your confidence around it for sure. This is Ryoanji. It is probably the most visited statistically garden in the world. It's a dry stone garden, famous for kind of typifying the dry stone garden. And we spent some time there, of course. A lot of the well-known gardens that tourists attend, such as like the Golden Temple, the Silver Temple, are lovely places, but because they're so frequently visited by tourists, you're often going to go on your own, or people go in the weekend on your free time to visit. We try to bring you to lesser known temple gardens that are also really important in terms of the aesthetics and the understanding of Japanese landscape architecture and urban design concepts that are relevant world over. Ryoanji is an exception to that because it is the most well-known or the most visited garden in the world, and it is on our list. So here is one of our students, Ali Puglialis, in Myoki-an. She just sat down right there in the tea garden. And most of the gardens that you think of as Japanese gardens in temples, they have an engawa porch, and you sit on the porch and you look into the garden. You don't go into the garden unless you're involved with maintenance of some kind. And that kind of separation is important for the theory of observing life and for understanding what is real and what is an illusion, which is something of the theme of our media class. But there's an exception to that, which is the tea garden, which is intended to be explored step by step as an immersive experience. So in kind of a 5D way. So here she is. She took full advantage of that. She sat down right there on that kind of relic temple stone, and she did her paintings right there in the middle of the garden itself. Here is one of my favorite photos of Yoshimura Sensei in Koto-in, which is just a lush green temple. And yeah, you start to get this sense of the contrast between the serpentine forms in the gardens and the architectonic rectilinear framework around it. So one of our optional trips, which I would actually like, I think that most students will want to go on, to be honest, is a countryside trip where we go to see the Satoyama and experience that and experience a village life in the north of Kyoto. Yoshimura Sensei has actually renovated a house where we'll be staying, an old Japanese farmhouse. And then there's also a neighbor that's running an Airbnb in a Japanese farmhouse. And in the summer in the countryside in Japan is a wonderful experience. Fireflies, sparklers, it's great. Here's a river there, and we're pulling things across the river. You might think, if you're from the West Coast, oh, that must be cold, but it's not, because it's hot and humid out, and yeah, it's lovely summer temperatures. And by the way, if you think it might be too hot, we actually do most of our work in the morning and the afternoon and the evening, and we have a long lunch break in the middle where students make their own lunch or go out to lunch. And around the temple, around Myoshinji, there are a lot of delicious lunch places in the neighborhood. In 2016, we worked on a site that was a former illegal dumping ground that was formerly run by organized crime, and had a lot of issues related to undocumented people. And the question was, how can we provide design plans for this site since now the city had taken it over? And it was a challenging project because it dealt with a lot of social issues and challenges and marginalization, exclusion in the Japanese context, which is really interesting. These things come up in things like literature, anime, poetry, comedy over time, over the centuries. But to try to tackle it with design was an interesting challenge. On that site, of course, it was a garbage dump, so it had things like cars, and then they had grown plants around it. It was like a mountain of garbage that had become grown over by plants. We were considering diagramming that when we were in one of the temples, and we were having a kind of a group critique. And so this was a sketch that came out of that, just thinking about those things. And I like this sketch as well because it's thinking about how watercolor and the flow of water actually serves as a tool in getting a point across. And I think that we should play with that more. In 2015, our site was the central market of Kyoto, a wholesale market, an incredible place. And next door, Shimabara, where, like I said, I lived for a little bit, for a year and a half or so. And I also went to over the years before then and after then to participate in Yabunochi style tea ceremonies, and I'm very involved with the community there. And this is a set of maps of that site. And that's something about Japan is incredible mapping tradition. So you always have a lot of great maps, and we work together as teams, like I mentioned, and the faculty also work with you in group crits. And that's kind of the purpose of the studio is of the design class is to work through a design problem by making drawings and working as a team to make those drawings and think about also this year we're going to try to think about how individual scenes and objects that are part of the architecture and part of the city are also representative of these larger factors, social factors, larger issues of inclusion, exclusion, of economic challenges, of demographic change, things like that. And then we'll bring it together in this group projects, and we're going to do drawings together, which we present to the city. So here, Xiaowei Bai, Jenny Lam, and Cal Plata, this is Kyle, are presenting their project, their proposals to representatives from the city employees, and also to neighbors who were involved in that. Here's their drawing. Again, this actually made it to the website. A lovely vision of that, and that site is associated with the red gates of Fushimi Inari, which you may know if you've been to Japan or Kyoto. Here's Flora's group in more detail, some of their work. And here's Ross Brown, Sarah Holmister, and Nadia Quiroz in the same year. I like their section perspectives and how they imagine that garbage treatment site would be transformed over time into a wetland and into a natural space for people of all stripes. So here's Ben Luck, Ali Puglialis, and Anastasia Karashian, and their beautiful work from 2015 for the Central Market and the park associated with it. I like their diagram as well. They time planned out the site and considered that in some detail. And yeah, I've actually stayed in touch with a lot of the different groups, these folks as well. And Anastasia, she made a film during the summer where she focused on things like mochi and sweets. And we had a lot of fun working on that. So eating, of course, the amazing mochis. Kyoto is in fact famous for its sweets, for its okashi, its mochi, and its tea sweets. So I'd love to buy those tea sweets in Kyoto. For $2, you can get an amazing tea sweet. I mean, used by the top tea schools. So here is the group I mentioned before, Flora Chen and Ryan Nicholson, Peter Overmeyer, Nathan Coral, presenting their proposal, beautiful drawings, to the city. The city is giving feedback. The representatives from the Department of Urban Planning is giving feedback about the drawings. And that's pretty interesting in its own right. So there's two courses. One is LD Arc 135, Landscape Architecture 135, Sacred Landscapes, which this course, for the purposes of the program, is called the Media Course, or the Dream World. And it deals with this idea of Kuso illusion and Genjitsu reality, and Yume dreams, and this kind of veil of what is illusion, what is reality, and how does personal experience kind of take you through that veil. How can drawing and painting take you through that veil and work with narrative and seasons, and how can you breathe in the scent of those kinds of seasons? And how does one become aware of change of time, or mono no aware? How can one open their mind, mushin, open heart, open mind, to become more aware of this context? Are the aesthetics of wabi and sabi, broken down loneliness, which are deployed in that Sukiya style of architecture? Is that something that has been created as a formal object-oriented vocabulary of space making that allows people to become more aware of the passing of the seasons, aware of this kind of humanist sense of loss as time goes on, and how in something like meditation, zazen, you become more sensitive to what are your changing thoughts of this world around us. And of course, how do we draw that as well? The second course I'm talking about for the class is Landscape Architecture 140, also known as Social and Psychological Factors in Open Space Design. And for the purpose of the class, it is called Design Practice Course, or Integrity Shoji. And it is where we get into the nitty-gritty of a particular site in the city. And we visit the site and we talk to neighbors in the site, and we learn about a particular issue that they're expressing. They may express a variety of issues, actually. And then with your group, you have to think about how to address that through design. And of course, we have a lot of opportunities to discuss that. We also have opportunities to experience things like calligraphy and tea ceremony, and these kinds of cultural practices in getting closer to the site, thinking about the site, observing the site, and doing a set of drawings of an intervention that may allow people in that neighborhood to see their own space in a new way, because they're very, very much collaborators in this. And then in the final review, we present it as a team and we get the feedback, and everybody in the past has gone home really enriched by the experience. The instructors real fast. One is me. You probably know about me because I'm talking, but I work with a number of agencies right now in my practice of various stripes, a lot of them Native California organizations and Native organizations around the country. I've worked teaching for different schools. I did this program with the University of Oregon in the past, Kyoto program in the past. I worked for QRP, Cornell Rothschild Partners in New York City, Sorkin Studio on projects in China, SWA also in projects in China. And I'm relatively well known for a project in Hangzhou, which was my own organization with my collaborator, Nicola Boyich, where we addressed change and greenwashing and gentrification through a landscape installation in Hangzhou. Yeah, and rendering, of course. I've done a lot of that and written about various things like Zen, psychosocial design, decolonial landscape architecture. Flora Chen is the guest instructor that I mentioned before. She works for Hart Howerton. She has her drawings published with Chip Sullivan, who's a professor, emeritus professor at UC Berkeley. She studied in Taiwan, National Taiwan University. She has studied at the University of Oregon, and she's also done various art installations and gotten fellowships around art. And so she's a practitioner. She has a sensitivity to art. She can help with a lot of practical elements of design. And she's just a great person overall. So glad to have her this year. Satoko Motouchi sensei is also, I mean, such an important asset for this program. She can paint realistically, of course, and she is a watercolor instructor in Oregon, but she also does abstract painting and abstract watercolor and ink painting. And she's just a very dynamic person. She started a program, a study abroad program actually in Italy, I believe in Siena, for a number of years. She taught that with the University of Oregon. So yeah, she's just a great person as well to have in this program. And last but not least, of course, is Yoshimura Sensei, who is a professor in Kyoto University of Arts. He's a practicing landscape architect and urban designer. And like I should mention, Satoko Motouchi Sensei they're both from Kyoto. Daisuke Yoshimura Sensei is actually from a stone masonry family in Kyoto. And so, he, of course, has taken a lifetime to become a landscape architect and be able to be very involved in landscape architecture in the United States and also in Japan. He's currently doing a project, he has a lot of different projects, but one with Oprah right now on private garden. And a lot of other projects, large campuses, small personal private gardens. And he's a huge part of this program. His is the driving passion behind it over 30 years or so since the program was originally started by him and another professor. And a lot of connections in Kyoto. So you'll be able to, through him, of course, visit firms and think about how landscape architecture is done and architecture and urban design is done in Kyoto. So to finish up, of course, questions, you can email me at alan.e.waxman@berkeley.edu. And yeah, it is a summer program. So of course, the program can be found at the website. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Alan. Um, I'm curious to hear how you see this program might support graduate programs. I guess a couple things that come up with that. Like I've taken sacred landscapes through Berkeley already. So how might that look for credit? Is there a way to use this towards, I guess I'm just wondering with course credit, like studio credit or anything else. I'd love to hear any experiences that maybe former
So,
graduate students have had.
well, formerly when the program was with the University of Oregon, it was studio credit. I've been told by Professor Hood that currently we are not going to do studio credit this summer. We'll see how it goes this summer, see the reviews, and then maybe we can do it the following year. But the two courses that are listed, you should be able to get full credit. I think that Sacred Landscapes class may be marked as can be repeated for credit. So of course, a different class than Chip's class, very different context. And and so I think you can use it for graduate credit. When I asked that the website for the program put this is for graduate and undergraduate students, and they said, well, we have actually where they list junior, freshman, sophomore, et cetera, on the website that is listed as a template. And so they weren't ready to change that to say also for graduate students. But this program definitely can be for graduate students. And yeah, I mean, I'd say, we're also trying to work out people who are graduating want to do the program in the 3-year MLA program. And they have to figure out how they can, use the credit potentially, but also graduate and walk in the spring before they do the program. But I wouldn't recommend that at this time. I think if you're in the second year, this is kind of ideal for you if you're in the second year of the graduate program. Also, I know that undergrads are interested as well. And in my experience, I mean, I've taught a wide range of age groups, doctoral, graduate, undergrad, and high school, not all in Kyoto, but in different places. And I think that, to tell you the truth, collaboration is the key to doing good work. It's not just about, where you are in your career. Everybody has something to offer. So I definitely hope that we have a good cohort of grad students.
Okay, thank you. I'm also curious about any funding opportunities you might know of. It's definitely a chunk of change to participate in the program, so I'm curious if you know of any, whether it's grants or scholarships, anything like that, designed specifically for this program, or something else that you maybe know of that could apply.
So the good news is that for UC Berkeley students, I've been told that they can use any pre-existing fellowships, grants, scholarships that you have as UC Berkeley student to this program. I think that they're thinking in particular about undergraduates who have sets of scholarships and fellowships, for example, that may cover tuition. Tuition is about half the money that this program costs. And that's, it's not a small sum, because if you take this class, these classes, 6 credits during the school year, it's going to cost just as much as it is taking it during the summer. And the credits count for just as much, but it's not exactly cheap. The cost of living is also not free, but I'd say it's cheaper than Berkeley. So it's rent, your average rent in this program is cheaper than your average rent in Berkeley. It's about $1,000 for the 5 weeks. That's not the exact number, but it's about that. It might actually be below that. And then the food is going to be similar to what you might pay in California, and the flight, of course, is extra and not free. And actually, I feel like the flight is a little pricey these days. As somebody who used to go to Japan every year, every summer, I think the price of the flight appears to be like double. But maybe that's because of inflation. as well from when I used to go often before the pandemic. So I wish I could tell you more about direct scholarships to apply for, but the good news is that you can, whatever you're using now at UC Berkeley, you can apply to this, and those people who might be coming from other schools may have other scholarships from other schools that should be able to be applied. Some programs, some schools have like summer funding you can apply for that may offer a few $1,000s that can go to something like this.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. It's a bit loud where I'm at, so I put my question in the chat, but I can just like re-explain it. So um my friend who went to the previous in-person session said that there's only 15 spots, and knowing that it's isn't selective, is this going to be offered in a later year? How selective is it? And how is that chosen? Is that something that as a third year who plans on graduating spring 2026, I can consider as an option who did like kind of the summer after I graduate?
I think that you may, so you're graduating in 2026?
Yes.
Yeah, the most ideal thing for you actually, or for somebody in your situation, would be to do it this summer rather than the following summer, because I hope that the students who are graduating can do this program, but what I've been told is they have to have the credits. They need to do the tuition credits, and they may be able to walk in the spring. But for example, if you don't plan out everything perfectly, for example, it may complicate things. Like obviously, in selecting for these 15 spots, I would give priority to students who are graduating. So if this was your final year and you were going to do this program and you only needed 6 more credits to graduate, and you do this program so that you finish and you can walk in the spring, then obviously I'd want to give that person a chance, because if they don't do this program, they don't have enough credits to graduate. Okay, but I wouldn't recommend that. I think that the most ideal situation is actually do this program before your final year. Also, you may do things in this program, like this kind of involved design work might inspire you for certain elements of your thesis. It might be valuable to you for your final year in school. So it was a huge inspiration for me. I did it in 2009, and it basically got me into landscape architecture. I did it as a student in 2009, and after that, I was like, I really want to do landscape architecture, because it's really something special to combine this kind of in-person approach and work with the city and be involved in this kind of collaborative project. So yeah, there's only 15 spots. That is, I'd say, one of the best and worst things about the program, because obviously I want everybody who applies to be able to do it. And there's a number of faculty. I mean, it's got a great faculty to student ratio. There's myself, Yoshimura Sensei, Moto Uji Sensei, and Flora Chan. So it's like 4 of us for 15 students is pretty good. And then there's also, the monks, such as Naomi-san in the temple, who is extremely generous and helping students all the time. So I think that's a good thing about the program, is the fact that it's really an opportunity to work closely with faculty and do a project. And yeah, but the bad thing is it's a small number of students. I don't think I answered your question, but I would recommend to do it this summer before your final year.
Yeah, I think you gave me some useful information to kind of like make a decision. I guess like the other part of my question I'm still wondering is like you mentioned like during the application process, that's when you can kind of show, your interest, and you mentioned like something along the lines of that during your presentation. So just is there any more information you can give to kind of clarify what the process looks like of the application?
Yeah, so currently the study abroad application, I think it's just an essay, and that of course is great. But I'm going to ask that they post this. They haven't changed this yet. but that they also post that the students need to turn in a portfolio. And for students that are currently in, for example, a master's program, the portfolio is a very important thing they have ongoing, and it's going to have a lot of detailed information. It's going to have a lot of examples of projects and work. For students that are in undergraduate, they're not going to have that unless you're like an art student, or you're a landscape architecture or urban design, or architecture student or urban studies. But this program is open to everybody. So for example, somebody might be interested in Buddhism or art history or whatever it is. So for that case, if you don't have a portfolio yet, just do some drawings, do some sketches, and or paint, photography, ceramics, whatever you might have. Take some pictures of it and send that in. You can email it to me at any time, or you can send it in with the application, and that, I'm going to take seriously based on where you're at in your trajectory. It's not all about having people who are already, practicing architects.
Okay, thank you. I just have one other question, like more specific question. So we're doing a lot of like watercolor and artistic work. So besides the living fees and just the study abroad expenses, how does that come into play? Is that like, I know a lot of the intro architecture, landscape architecture, and environmental design classes at Berkeley have you like, you know, purchase like your materials in like a pack, and then is that something we need to be packing, or is that something we're getting there? I'm just curious about
That's a great question. It's something
what's
we should honestly include in the presentation. Thank you for asking it. The fee is included in the course fee. It's around $150. It is included in the fee. So it's part of the fee that everybody has to pay. And then we actually buy your materials in Japan. So you don't have to bring them, or if we tell the students to buy it, some students might buy it, some students might not buy it, or they might buy different materials or cheaper materials, or whatever it is. We want everybody to have the same quality materials, to be able to at least have the same starting point. And then everybody helps each other in learning experience. So we're going to buy those materials: paper, watercolor paper, paints, etc. We're going to provide that to you. You'll have it when you get there. Yeah, so you don't have to buy it, but it's part of the fee. And actually, part of the fee, this is slightly different, but part of the fee includes food. So we ask that you pay that part ahead of time, and then the idea is that actually you have, we will be either getting food, group meals, or providing money for food when you're there, because we want people to eat well in the program as well. So we're really trying to have students have a good experience. And based on my experience in the past, if students need to bring everything, like materials, there's just differences of quality. And actually by buying it in bulk and then dividing it up, it helps bring the cost down and the quality up. So through these art stores in Japan.
okay, got it. And I know you had like the times that the classes are in the presentation. I forgot what it was for the first one, but for the second class you're showing is like 2 to 6. Is there gonna be like a general schedule like release, just to get like an idea of what like a day-to-day might look like? I know you said there's like a lunch period, just to kind of know what to expect before we get there.
Yeah. So the classes, yeah, it says the first class is roughly 8 or 9 until 12. And you'll know every day, of course, exactly when we're meeting. And people often do have a little snack, sometimes for breakfast before, yogurt, etc. And then 12 noon is the end of that class. So the second class is from 2 to 6. And some of those days will be more organized than others, but that's a 2 hour break. So you have those 2 hours so that you can cook lunch, or you can go to a restaurant. The restaurants are pretty affordable, like under $10, you can get a really nice lunch. And actually, sometimes cooking food can be more expensive, because just the way supermarket food it costs in Japan is sometimes expensive. And then, these restaurants, they actually offer really affordable food. It's quite efficient meals. So So yeah, it's plenty of time for lunch and also just for taking a break. And it is pretty hot in July. So the idea is those times are breaks. And I should say we have air conditioning in the temple actually. So the temple itself is organized. I mean, it's sliding doors and paper walls. And so it's supposed to be cool in this season, but actually we have air conditioning. So if you close those doors, it's pretty cool. It's as cool as you want it to be in the summer. And so you feel free to eat and then relax and then we meet again. And generally speaking, you don't have to like stay up late working. You have the weekends to do things on your own, generally speaking, except for a couple of trips that are optional. And then like the satoyama. But I'd say in the end, students do end up staying up like right before their final review, as a big push. Uh, but it's not intended to be stressful. It's not that kind of program. It's a really fun program.
Yeah. Okay, I see. I guess my last question that I can think of right now, I'm just trying to think of everything I could wonder about. Um, so you mentioned, the group excursions and, being able to explore the city like on the weekends. How does transportation work? Does it recommend if you get like, like a train car?
Yeah, so you
I guess
don't
that's
have to get any specific train passes or anything, because we do kind of stay in one area. Um, some students, of course, after the program, they want to travel on their own. Then there's reason to have like their specific train passes that Japan does with foreigners. And uh, that aside, um, we highly recommend students use a bike. We actually have bikes in the temple, and they're pretty convenient for going to a few of the places in the immediate area. But not everybody wants to bike. So you don't have to bike. And usually every time we go to a specific destination, there's going to be a large group that wants to bike, and there's going to be a few people who don't want to bike. And then one of the faculty will go with the students that don't want to bike. And then one or two of the faculty will go with the students that bike. And it just works. It works well, I think, uh, because of course, not everybody wants to bike. Not everybody has the mobility to bike. They may have an injury or whatever it is, or they may just not ride bicycles. But some students love it. And so it's like $40, I believe, for the entire thing. And I don't think it is a required fee, but students that want to bike, they can have that bike for the whole 5 weeks. And then there are buses that people use a lot in Kyoto. And I think they're not too expensive. I believe when we go on group trips, we may actually have the tickets already, and then we distribute the tickets. And that's also true for when we go on the excursion so when we go to the north, to the countryside, I think we're going to take cars. When we go to Koyasan, we take a train. We get there, we go to Nara, we take a train, we go to Koyasan mountaintop. Then we go from there to uh, area famous for tea, okay, Uji, and we usually take a bus, and that's like a chartered bus. And so all of this is the transportation fee. I think it's like around $100 for the whole 5 weeks, and it's included in the course fee. So it's part of the required costs. And some of those things, maybe if you're especially an undergrad, I think some of those things are covered by scholarships, fellowships, etc. Grads, I don't know what's covered and what isn't covered, but there may be more money you can apply for.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I think for me, that's all my questions I have. Thank you.
Alan, could you share a little bit more about the relationship with the city of Kyoto and how the community projects work?
Yeah. So this program was first founded by Ron Lemajun and Daisuke Yoshimura about 30, probably more than 30 years now. I think it was in like 1970s. And over time, they didn't start with a relationship with the city. Yoshimura Sensei already had a lot of connections because he's from Kyoto and he's involved with traditional crafts. His family's involved in traditional crafts. His sister runs that company now. But And I believe he had worked in a landscape architecture firm that does traditional gardens, very well-known firm. So that does a lot of these gardens. So there were connections there, but they had to build up those connections. So over time, they got to know the monks in these different places. I came in as a student in 2009, and because I had studied Japanese in college, because I spoke Japanese and I was living in Japan, I was a right fit, to do that program. And then of course I thought about, wow, it would be so great to do this in the future. So after I got my MLA from Harvard GSC, I actually was asked to come back in 2015 and teach the program. And I taught it again in 2016. So the Department of Urban Planning in the city is more of Yoshimura Sensei's connection than my own. But it has become my own over time. And I'm happy to say that, all of this is a collaborative effort. But I should say that he is already there now. And he's been talking to the city representatives and thinking about what the site's going to be for the 2025 class. And in the past, every time the city gives us the site. Okay, so it's not our choice. They may give a couple of options, and then maybe as faculty we choose from those options. But I've found out that you can kind of tell what they want us to research, and then usually it's connected to the neighborhood. So when we go to visit the neighborhood, we talk to people from the neighborhood, there's representatives from the neighborhood. They tell you in their own words how things are going. We're translating as well. And it's just personal in that way. There might be like somebody who works in an udon shop. It's not always like a representative from a neighborhood. It might just be an average person you talk to. Somebody who works in an udon shop and they say the issues in this neighborhood are A, B, C, D. You go to a bamboo working shop or a tatami mat shop, reeds, and they say the issues in the neighborhood are ABC. And you get a sense. And then with your team, maybe you go back on your own during your free time or in the weekend and you talk to people more, depending on what the site is. If the site is not dangerous, then I would recommend going back on your own. And you just get a better sense. And you're taking, you're making notes, you're doing diagrams, you might do some sketches when you're there. This is all going into your thought process. And this comes out as your design proposal. And then we work with you through that process as well. So you're going to end up with a proposal that you're confident about. And so it should be relevant to the city, it should be relevant to neighbors. One of the projects actually from, I think right before I did it, was called the Horikawa Canal. And it's a old canal in the center of the city that was daylighted, part of it, and renovated. And that project was finished. Thank you, Annabella, as well. So I'm going to put this recording somewhere. I'm not sure. I'll email it to both of you for starters.
Okay.
Maybe I'll put it on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So that project was a, quote unquote built project over the years after the program. And we can hope that, maybe 2025 will become a built project.
So it sounds like any community engagement is going to be more like informal conversations, not like formal meetings and stuff.
So I believe we have had some formal meetings, but I think that students and also neighbors work well with more informal conversations and being shown around directly one-on-one.
Yeah.
Because some
Yeah.
are kind of set, if you go to a formal meeting, it's like a speech.
Yeah, I guess that's something I definitely would be careful about, like being in a place that I've never been and I don't speak the native language, that I'd feel really uncomfortable like having to lead community engagement or like waste people's time. So it sounds more aligned that it is just more of a cultural exchange, conversations, meeting people like residents who are affected by the project potentially where they are, as opposed to asking people for their time. Does
Yeah,
that sound right?
they definitely, you're not going to be asked to organize and lead a community project. Rather, you are going to be a member of a community project, which is facilitated by the city. And so you're
Beautiful.
going to be a participant in a community project.
Okay.
And because there's four faculty with varying levels of translational ability, you're going to be able to communicate.
Okay, great. Can I ask one more short question?
Please.
More about the media. It sounds like this program is mostly analog. What is the expectation regarding computers, digital work, anything in that realm?
So I think that hopefully with the rise of AI, we should, as a society, be more and more aware of what a fine line it is between digital and analog.
Hmm.
Okay. So I'm hoping that, I mean, we might deploy some digital tools, but it's going to be intuitively done. In other words, drawing is the way of interacting with the digital.
Hmm.
And you're not even required to bring a laptop. Okay. Some students do. Some students
Yeah.
also bring laptops and they use them for research and
Yeah.
they use them for precedence and interests. And but because you're there, and there's so much print material in Japan, you have a lot of you have the ability to do research through an immersive process, not just online. So
Hmm.
I would say feel free to bring a laptop. It's totally safe. The temple's safe. Like you can leave a laptop there. If there's something stolen, it's going to be from a student. It's going to be a student stealing from a student. So we're going to try to avoid that. And we will talk about how important it is to respect each other's things and things of that nature, and how to go through the process of making a complaint if something comes up, and conflict mediation and all those things. But uh, the temple is safe in general for your things, and so you can bring a laptop, but you don't have to.
Okay.
And in fact, we're going to provide you with those drawing tools and those papers, and there's art shops as well to get extra things. So I'm happy to say this is a cutting edge program in terms of thinking about how we can move as a society beyond cumbersome tools towards intuitive tools.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you. Appreciate you making extra time to do this again.
Hey, thank you very much. And I'll make the recording available to you, and we can circulate it.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your week.
Okay, you too. Bye bye.